everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. Welcome to our 7th annual Free the Seeds Fair. This is our second and final time doing a full virtual event. Next year we'll be back in person. Free the Seeds is a community-based project of Land to Hand Montana, which is formerly known as Farm Hands Nourish the Flathead. And it's rooted in building a sustainable and resilient future through real seeds, real food, and real skills. Land to Hand's mission is to build a strong community food system that fosters socially just ways of accessing food. And Free the Seeds provides all of us an avenue to help build on that system. While this is a free event for anybody to participate in, it does take time and money to organize and put on. If you would like to support the efforts and help continue to allow this event to happen for our community, you can go to landtohandmontana.org and donate through the donate button on our homepage, or there is a link on the Free the Seeds page as well. We'll also drop that link in the chat for you. And finally, we want to thank this year's major sponsors, Box of Rain Organic Garden Center, who offers gardening supplies and classes in Kalispell. We'll link their website in the chat also. You guys will get lots of links from us. And Save Farmland, which is a new nonprofit that's based in Whitefish and is working to preserve farmland. And finally, you all are amazing seed savers who grew and saved seeds for us to package and distribute this year. At this year's seed giveaway, 75% of all of the seeds that were given out were saved by people in the community. So we're really grateful for that and happy to have you here tonight. This is Farmer Whitney, and she's going to teach you guys how to make lentil burgers with lemon yogurt sauce. Whitney is the education programs manager with Land to Hand Montana. She's been teaching kids about food and where it comes from for 8 years and has loved expanding Land to Hand's education programming to include after school and online cooking classes, as well as summer camp programming in the Wildcat Garden. And I'm just going to sing her praises for a moment. Whitney is an amazing person. My children got the joy of experiencing some of her education opportunities in their school, and they just loved her. So you're in wonderful hands, and I hope everybody enjoys their evening with Whitney.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Brenna. I'm really excited to get started, everyone. And this is a live cooking class, so you're welcome to attend even if you're not ready to cook. But I will be walking everyone through a recipe to make lentil burgers with yogurt sauce. And as Brenna mentioned, I can't monitor the chat or watch anyone's videos. So please do put questions that you have in the Q&A so that Brenna can answer them or share them with me. And I'm really excited to get started. So let's move along. So this is what you already know: cooking with kids, lentil burgers and yogurt sauce. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my pink cutting board here. And throughout the presentation, on one side, you'll see instructions, and I will keep the instructions from the previous slide on there as well. So hopefully if you get a little bit behind, you'll be able to catch up. And typically when we do these cooking classes, it's in pretty small groups, so I get to watch everyone's videos, and I can't do that today. So please do put in the Q&A if you have a question, if you need me to slow down. I'm trying to pace for around an 8 to 10-year-old who hopefully has a parent or guardian with them as well. And I'm excited to get started. So as you can see, our first step is to wash your hands. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and wash your hands. And then you can gather the supplies that are on this list. So you'll need a cutting board. I recommend a chef's knife, but you can use any kind of knife. A large nonstick skillet. You can also use cast iron, that would work great. A grater, a food processor, or a blender, that is optional. 1 medium onion, 1 small zucchini or a carrot, and about 3/4 of a cup of oats. So for right now, if everyone can just be making sure your hands are washed and gathering those supplies, we'll get started really shortly. All right. So hopefully everyone is working on gathering their supplies. The first thing that we're going to do is chop half an onion. And when you're cutting something that's round, like an onion, you want to be really careful when you make your first cut, because this is when it's the most wobbly and dangerous. So this is the root end of the onion, and this is the stem end. And we'll be making a cut from the stem to the root. So whenever we're cutting, we use a claw hand. So we bend our knuckles and our fingers over so that we are safe when we're using our knife. So I'll hold my onion with my claw hand, and I'll make a single cut from the stem to the roots. If we have smaller kids in here, this first cut is great for an adult to make, and then the later cuts are good for kids. I've cut my onion in half from the stem to the roots. And now our next step is we're going to take all of the papery skin off. And this is a pretty special onion. We bought almost all of our onions locally from Two Bear Farm this year, and this is our very last one. So we made it through March with our locally grown onions, but this is our last one. So what I just did is I cut off the little stem part of the onion for while I'm peeling the skin off, but I'm leaving the root. The root is still attached. And sometimes onions are really easy to peel. Sometimes they're kind of hard. This one is pretty easy. So our goal for this onion is to finely dice it. So basically to cut it into really small squares. This is my favorite way to do it, and I would recommend you all try it. So again, we'll use our claw hand, and I'll take the tip of my knife and I'll make a cut that goes all the way down to the cutting board, but does not go all the way to the root. And so it kind of looks like this. It's still attached at the root, but it went all the way through. And I'll keep making cuts like that that are pretty close to each other, all down both sides of the onion. And if at any point you feel like the knife is getting close to your hand, you can just stop. It's okay if you have bigger chunks of onion. You can just take your time. And if you feel like your hand is in a weird position, feel free to move your hand somewhere else. Pick it up, take your hand away. We never want to have our hand in a position where it feels unsafe when we're using a knife. So this onion will be a large part of our seasoning for these lentil burgers. So that's why I want to chop it pretty small so the burger will hold together. So once you have your onion cut like this, it'll have some nice strips. And I'm just going to pause for a little bit to see if people need to catch up, and then we'll finish cutting our onion. So once you have these strips cut into your onion, again, using your claw hand, you'll turn the onion 90 degrees so that when you cut this time, you're cutting across all the cuts you made before, and you'll get a nice dice on your onion. And why this works so well is that the roots are holding everything together. So you're not trying to hold the pieces of onion together as you cut, and you can make really nice, fine dice. And I do press down towards the tip first, and then the rest follows. When I get towards the root end and it feels a little hard to cut, I flip the onion over so it has a really nice, large, flat surface. And then I cut it some more. If you feel like your onion didn't get small enough, it is okay to have a really flat palm with your fingers pointed up and run your knife kind of rocking it from the tip. But mine look pretty good. All right, I'm gonna switch to our next slide, but this information will still be up there. Okay. So let me look really quickly. Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna do is actually cook our onion. So this is where you'll need your skillet. And again, this can be nonstick, it can be cast iron, whatever you would like. Bigger is better because we're going to be cooking our lentil burgers in this. So you want it to be fairly wide. It doesn't have to be super deep, but it should be fairly wide. And into this skillet, we'll put all of our onion. And we'll add 1 tablespoon of oil or butter, and whatever kind you have will work. So olive oil will work, grapeseed oil, avocado oil, any kind of oil will work, or butter. And we'll just put 1 tablespoon in. So once you have all of your onions and 1 tablespoon of oil or butter in your skillet, we'll put it on the stove over medium heat. So if you have numbers on the dials for your stove, that's usually around a 4 or a 5. So again, all of the chopped onion, a half of an onion finely chopped, 1 tablespoon of oil or butter over medium heat. And we're gonna let that onion cook for about 5 minutes. We really want the onion to soften and to turn translucent because that'll make it even tastier once it's in our burgers. So once you have that done, the next thing you will need is a grater, and any kind of grater works. This is the kind that I have. And we're going to be grating our zucchini, or if you have carrots, those are great too. And the zucchini actually adds some texture and some moisture to our burgers. And so that's why it's going in there. I'm going to cut off just this little tip right here. And then I'll grate this entire zucchini while my onions are cooking. And I actually, when I'm cooking with kids, I have more injuries with graters than I do with knives. So I just really recommend to people that you really take your time with the grater and keep your fingers really far away. And I just remembered that we have some polls that I forgot about. So in a little bit, Brenna will have a pause and we can do some of those polls because I forgot.
Sounds good.
I got too excited to start. So I'm grating my entire zucchini. And again, this will really add moisture to our burgers. And be paying a bit of attention to your onion. I am just now starting to hear a little bit of sizzle sounds, and that's good. We want to hear the onion sizzling. So if you don't hear that yet, that's okay. But in the next minute, if you don't hear it, you might want to turn it up a little bit. We don't want to burn the onion, but we do want to make sure it's cooking. Okay, so once you have your grated zucchini or carrot, we're gonna set that aside. And the next thing that we're going to add into our lentil burgers are oats. And if you don't have oats, that's okay. You can skip them, but they do help hold the burger together and soak up some of the moisture that's going to be in there. And if you have whole oats like I do, it's best to grind them. So we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of oats. And if you have a food processor or a blender, you can grind them in there. If you don't have one of those, that is okay. You don't have to, they can go in whole. They just bind a little bit better when they're ground up. So I'm gonna put 3/4 of a cup of oats into my blender. And then I'm going to mute myself because I don't think you all want to hear the sound of my blender. So I'm going to blend 3/4 of a cup of oats. Okay. So I'm just going to go over these past instructions to make sure everybody is on the same page. So by now your onions should be sizzling. You can probably hear what mine sound like. Take a wooden spoon or a spatula, whatever you have, and just stir them around a little bit. Hopefully you don't have anything burning or sticking. But we just want to make sure they're nice and sizzling in the pan. Then we have our zucchini or carrot is grated. And we have about 3/4 of a cup of oats that have been ground up or are whole, whichever works. And now, actually, Brenna, is a great time to do our polls. So I think the first poll is about how old our participants are. So just go ahead and answer how old the kids in the room are. There's also an adult option, and just let us know what's true for you. I love watching the poll happen live. Awesome. Thank you for that, everyone. So it looks like we have a bunch of adults cooking with us today, which I love. I'm so glad you're all here. And then most of our kids are under 8. So that is wonderful. Brenna, let's do the other poll right now too.
All right. I'm going to launch it.
So this poll is just about kids cooking at home. And so this can be in any way. It can be, just watching cooking or making dinner by themselves. It can be anything, but just how often do kids participate in cooking at your house? So make sure you are watching your onions, give them a little stir. If it seems like they're close to burning or browning really quickly, you can absolutely turn the heat down. Just make sure they're still cooking. Awesome. Okay, this is great to see. Brenna, thank you for these polls. It looks like a lot of our participants are sort of in the sometimes category for having kids participate. And I will do my best to include lots of information about how kids can be involved while we're cooking today. Okay.
Whitney, I'm going to jump in real quick with a question.
Please.
Brenna Young has asked, what do we do with our oats?
Are they ground up? If they're ground up, we're going to add them into our bowl very soon. But for now, we're just setting them aside. Do you think I answered that?
I think so.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're gonna jump back into cooking. So you'll need a pretty large bowl. This is where we're gonna put all of our lentil burger ingredients in. So get a pretty large bowl, and then we'll add all of our lentils in there. It's about 1¼ cups. That's about what 1 can is. But any amount you have is great. So if you're like me and you cooked 3/4 cup, you can just add it all in. Otherwise, you can add 1¼ cups of lentils or a can of cooked lentils. And now we're going to smash the lentils. So if you have a potato masher, that's great to use. A metal spatula works, a fork works. And we're just kind of mashing the lentils into a bit of a paste. They will not become a full paste, but we're mashing some so that they will, again, stick together a bit better. So you can see that I use the side of my bowl to do some of this. And you don't need to mash every single one. We're just trying to get some paste in our bowl. Anytime that there's mashing involved, always a great way to include kids. Also, anytime that you're doing any baking, especially if it includes kneading or cutting out things like biscuits, those are also really good times to include kids. Those are still some of my favorite things to do. So give your onions a check, stir them if needed. Some browning is great, but we don't want to let them burn. So again, feel free to turn down your skillet if you feel like you're getting too much browning. But we're waiting for our onions to get a bit more translucent and softened. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next, oops. So right now we have our lentils that are pretty well smashed in our bowl. We'll add our 3/4 cup of oats. So this is where our oats are going in. Then we'll add all of our grated zucchini. Or carrots, whatever you have. And then if you have breadcrumbs, we'll add 3/4 cup. If you don't have breadcrumbs, you can also use smashed crackers. I have done that before, or chips. We're gonna add 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs. So right now I have my lentils, my grated zucchini, 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs, 3/4 cup of ground oats. And then we're gonna add about a tablespoon of dried herbs. So you can add oregano, you can add thyme, you can add Italian spices, you could add rosemary, just about whatever dried herbs you have at home. We'll add 1 tablespoon. If you don't have any dried herbs, you can skip this. Next, we're going to add 2 eggs. And if you have an egg allergy, you can skip this. Eggs are just a really nice binder. I would recommend for kids to crack the eggs into a separate bowl first. So that way, if they accidentally get some shell in there, it's easy to remove. So crack 2 eggs. And if you do lose any shell, using the shell you have in your hand to pick it up works really well. So you can just dip the shell in to get any shell out. We'll add our 2 eggs. And if you just cracked eggs and you have any egg on your hands, go ahead and wash your hands quickly. We don't want to have any salmonella happening. That's what raw eggs can give us if we're not careful. Then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. And then if you have ground pepper, you'll add 1 teaspoon. If you have a grinder like I do, just add a really good amount of black pepper. And then the last thing that we're going to add is our cooked onion. So my onion is looking like this. You can still, it's still pretty white, but it's browning really nicely. I would say at least 50% of it is translucent. So being really careful because your pan is hot. We'll add the onion in to our bowl. And do make sure you turn off your stove. So I'm going to say these all one more time. So in your bowl, you should have your cooked onion, your grated zucchini, 3/4 cup of ground oats, 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs, 1 tablespoon of dried oregano or thyme or Italian seasoning, 2 eggs, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 1 teaspoon of black pepper. And then we're just gonna mix everything together. So you can use a fork, you can use a wooden spoon. You'll need something fairly sturdy because it will get really hard to mix. We're gonna do our best to mix it all together. And you really want to make sure you're scraping the bowl, scraping the bottom of the bowl, because we want everything to mix together as well as possible. Sometimes you'll find pockets, like a pocket of breadcrumbs, and we'll just keep mixing until it seems really well combined. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to form these ingredients into patties. Now, I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but my mixture is fairly moist. It's not wet. It's not like there's, you know, water pooling at the bottom, but it's fairly moist. And if I take a handful and I squeeze it together, it holds together pretty well. That is what you want. If your mixture feels so dry and crumbly that you can't squeeze it together at all, you can add a little bit, like a teaspoon of water, and just keep adding that until it feels moist. but really take your time on that, because too much water and it won't taste very good. It might not hold together that way either. So in order to form our patties, I'm gonna get out a baking sheet. You can use just about anything for this. This is not going into the oven. This is just so that our patties have somewhere to be while we make our yogurt sauce. So you could put these on a cutting board, a baking sheet, a Pyrex pan, just something where they hopefully won't stick to it too well. So a wooden cutting board would not be great, but where we can make the patties. So we'll make about 6 to 8 patties. And I make them in the shape of like a hamburger patty. You can make them however you want, but I just take a handful. I use both my hands to squeeze it together, kind of like making a snowball. So there I have a round ball. And then I'll put it down and just flatten it. And I want it to be about a 1/2 inch thick. And what's really important for this is that your patties all look similar to each other. They don't have to look exactly the same as mine, but you want them to be really similar in size and in thickness to each other, because that's how long it'll take for them to cook. So one trick you could use a half cup measuring cup to measure how much you're using. You could use a ladle, you could use an ice cream scoop. I'm just using my hands, but you can absolutely use a measuring tool, because we do want them to be pretty similar in size and definitely in thickness. And if some of your lentil patty ingredients are kind of falling out, that's okay. You can probably see when I put them on the baking sheet, I use my hands to kind of cup the edges. Maybe I add some things back in. Some of these ingredients will fall out, but we do want to try to keep them as together as we can. And again, I'm shooting for about 6 to 8 of these patties. And this one looks a little big, so I'll just take a little chunk off of it. You can also just add a little bit if you need to. And one of the reasons that I wanted to make lentil patties is that they're actually really special here in Montana. So Montana is the largest producer of lentils in the United States. We actually produce, I think, 40% of all the lentils. We grow 40% of all the lentils that are grown in the United States, which I think is very exciting. There's a really cool book called The Lentil Underground that you can read if you're interested in learning more about lentils. And whenever I teach kids about lentils, I say there's 3 reasons why I love them. They're really good for the earth. Lentils fix nitrogen as a pulse. So they basically help the soil build its own fertilizer so that other plants can grow really well there. They also are really good for our bodies. Lentils are a great source of protein. They have a bunch of different vitamins and nutrients in them. And finally, lentils are grown in Montana. So it's a really easy way to support local agriculture if you live in Montana. And so I have to scooch my patties up a little bit, but they're holding together really well. So it's not a problem for me to scooch them. And we're not baking them on this sheet, so it's okay if they're touching, if they're a little smushed. This is just where we'll hold them until we cook them. And this is a recipe that you could make with other pulses. So you could make it with chickpeas or other beans. All right, so I'm on my last patty. Once you're done forming the patties, we're going to set this aside because we'll make our yogurt sauce, and then we want our lentil burgers to be hot when we want to eat them. So we'll cook them right before it's time to eat. So once you have your lentil patties all done, we'll set them aside, wash our hands, and then move on to our yogurt sauce. So I'm going to put this next sheet up. Do not worry if you're still working on your patties. This is a great time to tidy up your space while we're kind of in between. So this is everything that we'll need for our next part of the recipe. We will also need our cutting board to cut the lemon that we'll be using. But feel free to take some time right now to gather your ingredients and to tidy up anything from the lentils that you would like a clear space from. If you're not allergic to dairy, I would say that yogurt sauces are one of my favorite things to make with kids, because you can make them savory, you can make them sweet, and they're a really good vehicle for trying new things. They're great for trying different fruits. They're great for trying different vegetables. You can make ranch dips, lemon dips, peanut butter or sunflower butter dips. I would say the possibilities are kind of endless, and they're really delicious. Okay, so I'm feeling like I'm pretty ready to start making the yogurt sauce. If you are not ready, you can throw that into the Q&A and Brenna can let me know. But I'm going to start heading in that direction, and these supplies will still be in the next slide as well. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is use our lemon. If you haven't already, I would recommend rinsing your lemon. Because we cut from the outside, we can bring any like pathogens or anything that might be on there into the lemon. So I always rinse them first. And we're gonna have a small bowl for our yogurt sauce, and we will zest the lemon. So the zest is the outer part of the peel. You can zest grapefruit, orange, lemon, lime, any citrus. And basically you want to get on a lemon the part that's yellow and kind of grate it into small pieces, but not too much of the white. So you'll see I'll grate a little bit and then I'll switch so that I keep getting just the yellow and not too much of the white. You can use what I'm using, which is kind of like a microplane. You can also use the small holes on a grater. Either works fine. And we're just going to try to get basically all of the yellow zest off of this lemon. So I just do a little bit of grating or zesting, and then I move the lemon so that I'm always getting the yellow and not too much of that white. And again, your knuckles might be really close to your zester or your grater. So just take your time and watch where those are. The zest has lots of the oils and the really good flavor in citrus. And so that's why we like to add it. It adds this big pop of flavor. So you can probably see I've gotten most of the yellow off of my lemon. And so that's when I know it's pretty ready to go. Before I cut it in half so I can get the juice out of the lemon, because we'll be using both the zest and the juice, I like to roll the lemon, not too hard so that I break it, but just to kind of break up the cells in the lemon and make it a little bit easier to get the juice out. So when we cut a lemon to juice it, we'll cut it right here. So if these are the two ends, we'll cut right down the middle. So not end to end, but just right down the middle. And again, we'll use our claw hand, really take our time. And we're actually going to use all of the juice of the lemon. So if you have a citrus reamer or a way to juice them, that works great. You just press down and twist. If you're sitting and it's kind of hard, try standing up, because the more leverage you have, the easier it is to juice things like a lemon. If you don't have something like that, you can just use a fork. And this can be a little harder for smaller hands, but look for any seeds. You can put the fork right in the middle, and then you just squeeze the lemon. And if seeds come out, you can pull those out. But again, in our bowl, we're gonna have all of the zest and all of the juice of one lemon. This recipe would also work with other citrus. You could do lime, you could do grapefruit. I've never tried that, but I bet it would be really good in this yogurt sauce. You could do orange also, which would keep it really sweet. What I like about the lemon is it cuts it a little bit, so it's got that nice sour taste. Okay, so everyone in their bowl should have the juice and the zest of one lemon. Then we're going to add a half teaspoon of salt. And the reason we're adding this is salt really brings out flavors. So to help us bring out all those flavors. So just a little half teaspoon of salt. And definitely don't go over that. You can always add more salt later, but you cannot take it away. Then we'll add 1 tablespoon of honey or maple syrup. Either works really well. My honey is crystallized right now, so I'm using maple syrup, but you can use whatever you have. So 1 tablespoon of maple syrup, a half teaspoon of salt, and then we're gonna add about 3/4 cup of yogurt. And it's absolutely okay to eyeball this. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll add about 3/4 cup of yogurt. And plain yogurt is best for this because then we know there aren't already sweeteners in there. But right about 3/4 cup. All right, and before we taste this, we're going to take the same skillet that we used to cook our onions. We're gonna put it back on the stove over medium heat again. So the same heat that we had last time. So medium, so probably around 4 or 5. And we'll put about 2 tablespoons of oil or butter in there. So again, we put the same skillet that we had our onions in, we put it on the stove over medium heat, and we put about 2 tablespoons of oil or butter in there. So it's on medium heat, and we just want that to heat up before we put our lentil burgers in there to cook. If we are kind of frying something, if we put what we're frying in before the oil is hot, it just soaks up the oil, and we just want it to get crispy. We don't want to soak up the oil. Okay, once your skillet is on the stove, we'll mix up our sauce if you haven't already. A fork works really well. A whisk works well. The citrus and the dairy don't always want to mix, so you just have to work a little bit on that. And once you have that all mixed, it's really important to taste your yogurt sauce. And it might taste a little bit strong because we're not going to be eating this just out of the bowl. It'll be on our burgers. But we should give it a taste. If it feels like it's too sour, too lemony, you can add more yogurt. You can also add a teeny bit more honey or maple syrup, but be careful. It can get really sweet really fast. If you don't taste the lemon enough, hopefully you have another one, so you can add a little bit more. Mine tastes really good. I don't taste any sweetener, so I'm gonna be really careful and just add a teeny bit. So once you're satisfied with your yogurt sauce, I'm gonna actually transition my whole computer setup over to my stove because we are going to cook our burgers. Can you come? Sorry, everybody, 1 second. Okay, we are back. Okay, so we're gonna move over to our stove. Okay, let's see what everybody can see here. All right, so hopefully you guys can see my pan, and Brenda, let me know if it's not doing that. But we're going to start. Oh yeah.
Real quick, Whitney, both your screen on your presentation and where your face used to be are now the pan.
Ooh, okay, thank you. Okay, I can fix that. Yes.
Excellent.
Hello, I'm by my stove, so it's a little funny. Okay, so hopefully you guys can all see my pan. I'm putting my hand not super close to it, but I can tell it's really hot. And so if you see any like smoke or steam coming off of it, you can absolutely turn it down. We're gonna start cooking our burgers. And so we're gonna be putting about 3 or 4 in at a time, depending on what you can fit. So I use my metal spatula and I just carefully scoop up a patty and then put it on the edge. You hear that sizzle? That means our oil is nice and hot. And if your patties fall apart a little bit, that's okay. You can kind of just press them back together with your spatula. And we're gonna cook these patties for between 2 and 4 minutes on each side. So I'm gonna set my first timer for 3 minutes and we'll look at them after that. The goal is to get a really nice golden brown color on the patties, just to make sure that they're nice and crispy. They taste really good when they're crispy, and to make sure everything is cooked through. So we'll do between 2 and 4 minutes on this side, then we'll flip them, do the same amount of time on the others, and then we'll cook our second set of patties. And this is obviously a time to be really careful, just in terms of splattering oil can really burn. And as you're watching, just pay attention to what's happening in your pan. If it seems like, again, you see any smoke, I would turn the temperature down. We don't want to burn the patties. We just want to get them nice and crisp. If you have a fan that vents above your stove, you can absolutely turn that on. And we're just letting our patties get nice and crisp. You could also definitely bake these patties in the oven. Baking them in the oven would dry them out more. So I do think they would probably crack and split a bit. But if the stove feels like a little too much, you could definitely do that as well. And the reason that I actually set a timer for 3 minutes is that I get very impatient and I want to flip them right away. So the timer for me is to tell me to take a drink of water and slow down. It's starting to smell pretty good in my oven. I can smell a little bit of like the onions cooking again, a little bit of herb. It's very exciting. Okay, so my timer for 3 minutes just went off. And so I'm going to really carefully with my spatula, just look under one of the patties and see if we're getting any browning. So I'm really careful as I go under it, then I'll flip it. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but there is some browning on that patty, and that's what we want. It's like a nice golden brown. It's not burnt, but it's definitely very clearly cooked. And that is what we want. So I'm gonna flip these other patties too. And that one came apart a little bit. I'll just nudge it back together. Totally okay. But we really want a nice crisp golden brown on the patties. And if yours need another minute, that is just great. All we're going to be doing for the rest of the class is just cooking our patties. So if you're ahead of me, great. If you're behind me, great. I'll set another timer. And I will say that often when I'm doing this, I fluctuate the temp on my stovetop. So sometimes I'll get worried it's cooking a little too fast and burning. So I'll turn it down to maybe 2 or 3, but then it won't be sizzling very much. And so I'll turn it back up. So it is okay if during this process, you're just watching the temperature and moderating it as you need to. So I think a lot of you might already know this, but at Lentil, we do have a lot of cooking classes for kids. Starting in 2020, we started doing after school cooking classes, which were really fun. We did them in Whitefish with elementary and middle school kids, and we're really excited to get back to those and have more in-person cooking class events. We also do these Zoom classes, which can be really fun because you're making dinner for your family. So we have a middle school class, and then we have classes for younger kids to cook with their families. And what I like about it the most is that because everyone's cooking at home, everyone just gets to transition to eating with their family right after, which I think is a really nice difference from a cooking class when you're in a classroom. We also have summer camps where we do a ton of cooking in the Wildcat Garden. So we harvest and we cook. And one of the cool things about cooking in a garden is there's all these different tools and utensils we can use. So like with the youngest kids, I'll often use scissors. And so we'll use scissors to cut up all the herbs we use. We'll use scissors to cut up greens like kale and lettuce, or we'll rip those depending on what we need. We use graters a ton. We use juicers and citrus a lot. All those things to make sure everybody gets to be involved. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so you can hopefully kind of see that nice brown texture on here. So that took about 2.5 minutes on the second side. So make sure you have either the same baking sheet or a plate or somewhere where you're going to put your patties once they're cooked. And I just make sure that both sides have gotten nice and crisp and golden brown. And I'm going to turn my stove down a little bit as I transition to my next batch. And I'm going to add a bit more oil back in, probably just another tablespoon or so. And again, just watch your pan if it's getting too hot or not hot enough. And then I'll just put my second batch on. And if you made bigger patties or have a smaller pan and need to do 3 rounds of frying your patties, that's totally great. Mine are going to fit into 2 rounds. I'll set my timer again. So once the second batch is done, I'll take off my screen sharing and we'll just see if there are any questions about this recipe, about other recipes, about how to involve kids in the kitchen. So if you have any of those questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A whenever, or just save them for the end. But it looks like we'll have a good amount of time. And just like with the onions, we want to make sure our pan is sizzling the whole time. But if it's so hot that it's smoking, or if it's spitting oil, we definitely want to turn it down because that could burn the patties and it could also be dangerous. The other reason to set a timer and to be patient is if you try to pick up the patties before they've cooked and form that crust, it's really easy for them to fall apart. So that's another incentive to be patient. I really like this recipe because it's fairly simple. And it's really easy to sort of dress up or down. So you could add side dishes. You could have different sauces if you wanted to. You could eat the burgers just like a meat burger with a bun with lettuce, or you could have them with the yogurt sauce, maybe with rice or something on the side. They're really flexible as a meal. And again, lentils are a really healthy protein and also a really sustainable protein, which I love. All right, so this is my last side. You can see these are really nice and brown and crispy. I had to tilt my computer down, so it's probably a funny angle of my video right now. So I did have my skillet pretty low on like 2, really on a low setting, and I'm turning it back up just to finish for this last minute or so. My dog has decided he likes the smells in the kitchen. He has now joined us. Yes, hey bud. All right. So once you're, I'm gonna let mine go for another 30 seconds or so on this side. I think my cooking slowed down a little bit. That's why you do want to check, make sure both sides are nicely cooked. I just tasted a little bit of the cooked patty. It was delicious. I hope you guys like yours. Okay. So once your patties look good and you've checked both sides, turn off the stove. Take those patties off. All right, I'm gonna move my little setup again. Make it a little weird for a second here. I think so. Okay, and I'm gonna stop sharing.
Whitney, we've got a comment. Mia Williams says, wow, really good.
Yay! I love to hear that. So please do share any comments. I also love to see pictures. If you have any pictures from cooking this recipe, please do share those with us. You can send them to hello@landtohandmt.org. You can also send them directly to me, Whitney, @landtohandmt.org. We'd love to see pictures. I'll make a little plate so you guys can see. I'm gonna put my lentil burgers on the plate, and then I'm gonna put some of my yogurt sauce right on top. See? Oh gosh, that's terrible. I did a very bad job with that. Let me switch. Okay. Okay, maybe you can't see it. But yeah, I just have my burgers on a plate with a nice little thing. I think there's a raised hand. Brenna, you might be able to let people talk at this point.
Yeah, I can do that. Let's see.
Joan, I think you should be able to unmute, Joan. Let's see if this is working. Joan, I see your raised hand. See if it popped up on your screen, just see if you can unmute. I am really enjoying these comments. I'm seeing that people are loving the burgers. Mine are good too.
Do you want me to do the last poll?
Yes, please do. Oh, good. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate hearing that. I often rush through cooking, so that's great to hear. So Brenda's going to put up our last poll. We have been doing these Zoom cooking classes this winter, and some people have really loved them, but we haven't had a ton of participation. So we're just curious to see if people are interested. And the way we usually build these is they're for anyone. They can be for adults, they can be for families, they can be for just middle school or high school kids. So Brenda's going to put up a poll about that. Oh, that's totally fine, Joan. I got excited you wanted to talk.
We've got 4 overwhelming yeses so far.
Yeses. We also always do offer scholarships for our classes, especially our Zoom classes. So we always try to make it as accessible as possible for everyone. I will say that's actually true of all of our programs. So there are always scholarship options if people need them, because we want to make sure everyone can participate who would like to. Awesome. That is all I have at this point. If anyone has any questions for me, especially if you want to know about certain recipes or things to cook with kids, I'm very happy to stay on here. But otherwise, everyone is welcome to go and have a delicious dinner. But do feel free to ask any questions if you have any. And Brenna probably has things.
We've got someone in the Q&A saying the burgers are so yummy, thanks, in all caps.
Oh, I love that.
Mia Williams asks, can we freeze these? And thank you so much, by the way.
Yes, you can freeze these. I would freeze them on, if possible, a flat thing. So like on a cookie sheet, freeze them, and maybe even with parchment paper between the burgers and the sheet, because that way they'll freeze as individual burgers. And then once they're frozen, you can take them off. And I usually put them in a freezer safe, like a freezer Ziploc bag with that parchment paper kind of in between the burgers. But as long as you freeze them separately, they should stay separate. If you stack them before they're frozen, they'll just freeze as a big chunk. Jen, that's a great point about having access to past lessons. We record all of our Zoom classes. So I think we will actually try to have available. We have a YouTube channel. We haven't put any of our cooking classes up there, but I think it would be really fun. So we'll check the quality of them. And if they seem like a good video to watch, I'm sure we can make those available. Thanks for that comment.
We can give folks a few more moments to ask questions if they'd like. I'm going to start closing out the session. I want to thank Whitney for this wonderful free cooking class. How exciting for everyone to be able to see what this is all about. I am going to put our donate link in the chat again. This is of course a free event, but it does take a lot of work for us to do. So if you have the means, even a small donation is very helpful. I also want to thank one more time our big sponsors for this event this year. Our biggest ones were the Box of Rain Organic Garden Center in Whitefish, in Kalispell, and also Save Farmland, a new nonprofit based in Whitefish working to preserve farmland. And thank you all for attending and joining us. I haven't seen any new questions in the chat or the Q&A. So if everyone is all set, I think we might be ready to go eat.
I think so. Thank you, Brenna, so much for making this possible. And thank you everyone for attending. I had a great time.